didn't have. This was also back during the days when you might get a few screenshots of a game in a magazine if you were lucky, but for the most part, you were going off of box art, especially if you were a kid who couldn't afford magazines every month. So I spotted the box art for Robotech Battlecry. It was probably an ad somewhere, but I don't really remember, and just kept an eye out for it. I do remember renting this game quite a while after its release, but I can't seem to remember playing it that much. It's almost like trying to remember things from almost 2 decades ago is hard sometimes. Recently, I've been spotting Robotech Battlecry a few times on my various trips to the retro game stores around me, and on my last trip, I finally just decided to pick up the Xbox version to give the game a try. Well, that, and I had to pick another game to review because the game that I was going to review, Spy Hunter, appears to confuse the heck out of my Xbox as the console thinks it's both a DVD and a game at the same time and won't run the game either way. Gotta love old consoles. Robotech Battlecry is an action-based mech game that was developed by Vicious Cycle Software and was published by TDK Media Active, who would eventually be folded into 2K Games if Wikipedia is to be believed. This was Vicious Cycle Software's first game, and my experience with this game is starting to make more sense now with that context, but more on that later. Robotech Battlecry is set in the Robotech universe, and from what I'm reading, follows the overall plot of Robotech, albeit from the perspective of a new character. You play as Jack Archer, a pilot flying for the Robotech Defense Force, or RDF for short. The RDF has constructed a massive ship out of the remains of an alien ship that crashed on Earth, and as the game begins, the aliens land on Earth looking for their ship. These aliens are called the Zentradi, and while having a humanoid design, they tower over human beings at roughly 10 meters tall. The rest of the game skips forward in time a bit and follows Jack as he battles with the Zentradi holdouts after an event known as the Reign of Death, which ended the formal war between the two factions. For anyone who isn't a fan of Robotech, this story will likely go right over your head, but that isn't too big of a deal for a game like this. The game is set up in chapters, chapter 1 taking place before the Reign of Death and chapters 2 through 5 taking place after it. There are a certain number of missions within the chapters, with chapters 2 through 4 having the majority of them. Missions themselves are relatively short, usually only containing about 2 to 3 short objectives to complete before moving on. There are issues with a few of these objectives, but again, we'll get to that later. You pilot a transforming fighter craft called a Valkyrie that has 3 different modes to change into. Fighter mode is your typical jet mode where it controls very similarly to most flight games. You're very fast, you make quick turns, and you have missiles, guns, and flares to ward off any incoming missiles. From a practical standpoint, the fighter is the best mode in the game, in my opinion. It can avoid enemy fire relatively easy and packs a punch if you can line up a shot without getting obliterated by everything around you. Not every mission is set up with the fighter in mind, however, so you will need to use the other modes as well. Batloid mode is the complete opposite of fighter mode, where you transform into a mech that does not move particularly quick. It uses a big gun and it has the ability where you can double the rate of fire, which can shred weaker enemies if you're close enough. It also has a sniping ability that does come in handy in a mission or two. I found the gun to not suit most situations, however, as stronger enemies have health bars similar to enemies in Destiny. Charging head-on while blasting an overcharged gun just never worked. Sniping also doesn't work much, as most of them can hit you from pretty far away and you can't move much in sniper mode. Its maneuverability in general leaves a lot to be desired, as its jet boots are more designed to go up and forward, or backward, rather than side to side. You can strafe with the jets, but it's kinda clunky as you still continue to ascend if you're not hitting the strafe buttons. You're better off strafing without the jets, as the Batloid can just walk, but that makes you even slower. This was the mode that was on the cover of the game, and kinda the primary reason that I was interested in Robotech Battlecry, as it is a really cool looking mech. Cool looking, but not exactly useful though, and it was kind of disappointing to find that I had very little need to use this mode while playing through most of the game. Finally, we have the star of the show, which is the Guardian mode. This mode is the halfway point between fighter and Batloid, where the nose of the fighter is mixed with the arms and legs of the Batloid. This allows for faster movement than the Batloid to avoid enemy fire while also giving you your missiles back. I would say about 3/4 of my playthrough of this game was spent in Guardian mode, and you'll likely have a very similar experience if you decide to check out this game. Most of the missions in this game seem to be designed with either the Guardian or fighter in mind. I didn't run into a ton of situations that couldn't be solved with the Guardian. It's faster than the Batloid, but slow enough to pick your targets carefully. It can actually strafe properly, and it has the ability to come to a complete stop and hover. It almost completely removes the need for the Batloid with that last part, minus one particular pain point. This thing cannot turn around to save its life, so you'll have to switch to another mode if you want to turn around quicker. That is another element of this game that, I confess, I didn't get super used to doing throughout my playthrough. You are supposed to be switching in and out of these modes to suit the situation as the level goes on. New enemies show up, or maybe you'll find yourself in a different part of the level with a different layout, so changing modes often is encouraged. Again, I mostly ended up getting through this game in Guardian mode, but I would sometimes quickly switch to Fighter mode to get out of trouble in the harder missions. And now we have made it to the section of the video where I talk about the primary issue surrounding Robotech Battlecry, and that is its mission designs. As I said before, this game has 46 missions, and I completed 41 of them, and to clarify, I played those other 5 missions, I just didn't complete them. I didn't get a proper count of them or anything, but it really felt like half of this game was either escort or defend missions. The concept is very similar either way. You are protecting something either as it moves throughout a level or stays in one spot, and every Zentradi in the Milky Way galaxy is trying to destroy it. You would think that the designers would make sure that you had certain things for these missions, like a health bar of the thing that you're protecting on your HUD maybe, but no. The health bar is on the thing that you're guarding itself. Sometimes. I noticed in one level that a building that I had to protect just didn't have a health bar, so I had to just kind of guess if it was about to blow up or not. Other than that, you just get someone saying, "Rogue Squadron, where's our cover?" whenever they take damage. And I get that the game that I just referenced has the exact same problem, but they also give the thing that you're escorting more health, and they're not constantly being pelted with fire. Also, Rogue Squadron isn't half escort missions. For anyone who has played this game before, I think you know which mission I'm about to talk about. There is one particular escort mission where you have to guard this fighter as it slowly moves across a wide open area of space, and it doesn't have a lot of health. This leads to you shooting across the level to try and clear out enemies before they can even get close to the fighter, but enemies are going to get through. As I mentioned before, there is no health bar for the escorted fighter in your HUD, so you can only check if you look directly at it, which is time not spent shooting enemy fighters. After the fighter gets to some random point in the level, it just kind of stops in an area where it's still wide open, and a counter starts counting down where you have to continue to defend it. The closest I ever got was 14 seconds, and that was less skill and more just flailing about all over the map. This part of the game is not about getting good, it's just about getting lucky. And then there's a mission that just plain bugs out and doesn't end. I killed every enemy as I was instructed and wait, put out fires? There isn't even a button for that. What is it even talking about? My general point about this is, while most of the missions are straightforward and beatable if you focus, others have a pretty glaring design problem. I'm thinking that this being the first game developed by the studio might have contributed to this, as they were likely still figuring out what worked and what didn't work with mission design. While I don't normally resort to it, I'm 100% okay with the fact that I used a code to unlock all of the missions. If I didn't use the code, then either there wouldn't be a video, as I would have stopped playing the game in frustration, or this video would be a lot angrier sounding if I had somehow managed to beat the game the normal way, and neither of those are a fun option for me. It's kind of a shame too, as Robotech Battlecry has a ton of things going for it. I really like the art style of the game, which uses a sort of light cell shading to give the game a bit of an anime-like look, albeit in 3D. It still looks really good on the original Xbox, though granted, I'm using an M Classic to both up-res and clean up the image. Still, I could see this looking pretty good if a proper HD port was ever done. Heck, the GBA Robotech game was just ported to the Switch and up-res to HD, so anything is possible, I guess. Also, apparently the dev team even went as far as to have the original voice actors from Robotech come in and voice the characters in the game. There was clearly a lot of thought and effort put into this game by the dev team, don't misunderstand me. But the shortcomings in the level design of some of these missions make Robotech Battlecry a really tough recommendation. If you're a Robotech or Macros fan, then you've probably already played this game, and if you're not a fan, then I just don't know if I can recommend it. I'd say it comes down to the platform. If you're playing on Xbox or GameCube, then I'd say maybe go for it if you can get it for like under 10 bucks. If you're on PS2, then I'd say maybe consider an Armored Core or Gundam game instead. What do you think though? Have you played Robotech Battlecry? If so, what did you think? Please leave me a comment below. Also, if you like this video, then please leave me a like and subscribe to see more videos from me. Thanks for watching everyone, later.